I'm Andrew Stuck. I'm the co-producer of Walk, Listen, Create. We're a not-for-profit supporting artists, writers and performers who make work on foot or about walking. We're really delighted that Ali Pretty, who's the creative and founding force behind Kinetica and the Beach of Dreams, is with us, but she also has another hat on. She's on the international board for the World Trails Network, and this is a sort of joint hosting show with Beach of Dreams, Kinetica, World Trails Network, and Walk, Listen, Create. Okay, so I'm going to invite Ali to host the rest of the show, as they say, and introduce Shinlee and Julie. So Ali, over to you.
Thank you, Andrew, and it's a pleasure to be here on this platform. And it's great. We've got several people from Australia, and I'll tell you why. So just a little bit of context. So I'm the artistic director of an arts company called Kinetica, and I've been practicing walking art for about 12 years. And we run an annual walking arts festival in Thurrock, in Essex, along the Thames estuary. And as part of my sort of walking work, I have become involved with the World Trail Network, which is an amazing organization of trail managers from literally all over the world and lots of different kinds of ways of walking, and many of them very much connected to community and using the walks to connect communities in remote places and also to bring a source of income. So, for example, the Camino de Costa Rica is a kind of coast-to-coast walk, and it goes through really, really small places where there's just maybe 7 people living in a village. And this walk means that they now have kind of connection to the outside world, and they have an income, and it's really organized so that it's a real exchange between the families in those villages and the visitors. So I was really fascinated by this network, and I'm on the board, and I've been invited to run the Arts and Culture Task Team, which is specifically to explore the role that artists can play to connect visitors with host communities, and also to share and inspire and curate conversations on the way, and also to connect people very much to place. And that's what I think we'll be looking at today with the conversation between Shinlee and Julie. And we've been running these seminars for the last year or so, where we've been looking at the practice of walking artists and really about their relationship to the communities and visitors that they work and collaborate with. So also, many of you have sort of mentioned about you're interested in Beach of Dreams. So I'm the artistic director of Beach of Dreams, which is an enormously growing project and has walking art at the heart of it. It's going to be, I'm going to share now. That's right. Sorry, I forgot about that. All right. Just had that. So Beach of Dreams is a UK-wide coastal arts festival, but the invitation would be to people beyond the UK, and it's inviting artists to walk with communities to have a conversation about the future of their coastline, particularly in the wake of the climate emergency. And it's a platform where we can have conversations like this to reflect about what we could do to create better futures in the coastline. And obviously, as artists, we've been working a lot with communities, and we are convinced that the interaction and the interventions that we have creates a stronger emotional connection to the landscape. And with Beach of Dreams, we're really hoping that this will translate into more action in communities to work together to combat the impact of climate change. So walking is very central to this project, and also to kind of facilitate and curate a conversation and making a response to the landscape. So I'm just going to skip through some of this. So it's happening all over the UK, and we've got 8 strong regional partners who are working with 8 artists, and Julie is one of these artists up in Fife in Scotland, and each one of those artists is responding to a particular question about the landscape, and they'll be creating a new piece of work. I'm going to flick forward to, so there's going to be lots of this. If you want to be more informed of Beach of Dreams, there's the Beach of Dreams website, and there's also seminars coming up. So today is really about Julie and Shinlee. And Julie is going to be working with the communities in Fife to create a new piece of work called the Tide Line. And so I've been have the pleasure of talking and walking with Julie for the last 8 months or so. And we walked up the coast in Fife and to find the spot where she's going to create her work. And so it's then subsequently I was at the World Trail Network conference and I met Shinlee. I'm going to stop here. And I met Shinlee, who's from the 1,000-mile trails in Taiwan. And she told me about the trails that they build. They have to maintain their walks. And so I suddenly thought, oh, it would be really amazing to have a conversation between Julie and Shinlee, because Julie uses the landscape and the rocks on the beach. And I just thought, we've got, on the one hand, a really amazing ancient tradition of building trails and master trail makers across the Far East. And then we have a fantastic contemporary artist who's also making a different kind of work, but there's a connection between them. And really, I'm going to hand over now to Julie to introduce her work. And then we can pick up a conversation about how it fits into the wider context of Beach of Dreams later.
Great, thank you, Ali. So this will seem slightly going a bit left field, but I'm thinking about Shinlee's work as I have prepared this talk and tell you about it, and I'll keep it as, just quickly watch time, so I'll keep it as brief as possible. I know with trail making, it's a combination of the craftsmanship of making the trails, and what I wanted to show you today is that actually my work is very inspired by very practical considerations as well as being immersed in the landscape. This is on the west coast of Jura. It's a natural cliff arch which I lived in for a period of 3.5 years. And in order to make it more habitable, right from the moment I started working, I did prepare for it for a year in terms of what I thought I might need. But I needed to, as soon as I arrived, and I was living, this is an entirely uninhabited coast, very solitary, need for being with plenty of improvisation, which I'm sure trail makers are always doing. And I needed to make a wall that was a wind baffle that would make it more sheltered from the wind, to make it a proper working space. I had gone there to paint the landscape. So these are large canvases, oil on canvases. And also I wanted to discover what my language, my artistic language, was made of. I was just hit 30. I'd been working for 10 years as an artist, but felt I was a bit blown around by different influences. And I wanted to understand the absolute sort of core of my practice. And what I found was, in doing so I was painting and working outside and drawing as I'd been for the last 10 years, but through building in the arch to make it more habitable, I asked myself, well, what happens if I use these skills in order to make work outside, actually interact directly with materials? I was collecting water every day, I was building fires every day, and this is how the birth of the Fastax came about. And suddenly I was drawing with light, drawing with fire, drawing with the elements and the tide. This is another work. I then spent a period of 17 years in an uninhabited island called Mingale, right down in the bottom of the Hebrides. And this was one of the works I created in response to its very bowl-like east coast. And the most exquisite element of the work I hadn't quite anticipated, but I had to, it's not a lined stone bowl, but in fact, because it reaches the rock bed at its deepest moment, it holds rainwater. So what I'm discovering as the work evolves is that often it's a very transient element that is the essence of the work, even though it requires building and construction to arrive at that moment, in a sense, the poetry of the work. We're now in Libya, in the desert of Libya, and you'll begin to see I've chosen works that will thread through to what Shinlee's organization is doing. So here, I'm not creating a trail or a path, but I'm just saying, what if I make a line, these wonderful blue-gray stones on orange rock, very, very striking combination. What if I draw with a landscape? I'm just shifting the stones to one side. I'm making this line. This is about 45 meters long. And the same in this desert here. I was in the center of Libya in my second year there. And this is in the volcanic plateau, and making this sharp sand line in relation to these volcanic plates. And I was this is a very, very extraordinary picture, because it's the only time in the Sahara I experienced rain, and it was literally one cloud coming, raining very, very hard for 10 minutes and then disappearing. And it created this absolutely exquisite sort of metallic sheen on these very absorbent volcanic plates before it got sucked back in. And in Libya, I then became more ambitious. I started rising the lines out of the ground. And this was one of my final pieces, 2 curved rising lines. And that gives you a sense of scale where I'm walking around them. So it's about rhythm, it's about structure, it's about using the materials from the landscape itself and creating just a slight realignment of the materials. So I know this is where so the work is both sitting out very strongly outside Shinlee's tradition, but at the same time, we're using so many principles that are very, very close to us, very, very dear to our practice. This is in northwest Namibia, and I wanted to show you this. When I was making this work, I was traveling through riverbeds in Namibia in order for us not to mark the landscape. I was with 2 Himba guides, and the riverbanks became a very inspiring sculptural influence on me, because that's what we were surrounded by, and they're a very strong sculptural presence, and also being eroded when the rivers are running. And so this is one of the works I made, and primarily they were often works about light and shadow, which is very, very powerful in Namibia. It's very absolute. But the thing I wanted to show you, which also connects with our conversation today, is that by cutting that, in a sense, that stretch of vertical face, so I'm sort of just rehoning it, I was able to reveal this process of time through these strata here. And I found that it got me thinking about how the work connects with mining, with archaeology, with time. But the beauty of the work is it's simply for its own sake. It's not trying to extract anything. It's not trying to take away something, but just reveal, and in a way invite you as the viewer to also engage with these elements, but sort of engaging our bodies with our thinking rather than it just being an idea. And I think that's crucially what walking does, is that it unites our minds and bodies in a way that's totally unique and what we all desire and seek every day. And this is the work 3 years later, when the wind has done its own sculpting and has been scouring the softer strata, if you want, and sort of therefore giving us a more pronounced, more sculpted clock of these hundreds of years of the river laying down different clays and different earths. This is in Japan, more recent work called Ascending. And I was in quarries in Japan, and I wanted to, in this piece, I wanted to take an eye line up to the big cut cliff, the man-made cliff. And I, because of all the thrown away stone, I was allowed to work through the spoil. All the spoil is sort of like blocks of stone. And so I thought, wow, once I had conceived of the eye line, I thought, what if I make steps? Then people can actually go up it. This is the view from the top of the steps, looking back down. So there are 3 flights, allowing for, if you see in here, this is the machinery track for where they take the thrown away stone up into the spoil. And the beauty of this, I was giving life back to stones that had been discarded for whatever reason, and also bringing people into the top of the quarry for the first time. That gives you an idea of scale and how the rhythm of it going up through the quarry. It's a purely, so I'm using a utilitarian form, but taking it completely out of context. And there is a beautiful space between the big cliff and the top of the steps. And also you can see that vertical drop at the bottom. Back to the fast acts, this has been a 10-year study just this last decade in a different part of the Hebrides in North Harris, on a very remote coastline in North Harris, because I had been developing my work through film and sound in a much more sophisticated way from when I was working in Jura. And from this period of study, I learnt so much more about what I've already mentioned, the sort of invisible forces that I'm bringing into play. And here is gravity, and as well as the dynamic between all the 4 elements, essentially the invisible forces of time and gravity, and how a visual catalyst can create a more physical relationship and understanding of those 2 things that are essential to us existing on, being pinned to the ground, to the earth. And also we work in time, but we can be very linear about using, we're very wedded to clock time, and it's incredibly mind-opening to be re-educated into tide time, into sun time, into different times, which as walkers, I think people are very aware of. And again, using methods that will be being used for trail making. And this is also in the Hebrides, same area, but a slightly different part of the landscape. This is receiving, it's called a winter wall, and it's receiving the setting light in the midwinter. And this is when it's just about to start setting, when it's coming through that vertical aperture. And in fact, as we speak, I have a wall working in sky this morning, receiving the rising light, which is very exquisite and lovely to think of that happening while we're all gathered and talking together. And then I'm going to finish with a few pictures from a very recent trip in Nepal, when I was in Upper Mustang, which is sort of on the edge of the Tibetan border. And again, I was walking at high altitude, so that was a new experience, and walking through the landscape over a number of weeks and making work as I went along. And this was one of the works that initially the works were very, very slight. They were just, in a way, echoes of all the amazing natural trails that have been created by animals over centuries, and also by the incredible human endeavor and enterprise of beautiful pathways and walkways and desire ways to get to fields and plateaus. And so really the work was sort of like an echo of these extraordinary myriad of pathways. This is a dug step work in a earth mound. And then this is a slightly more substantial work on the side of a hill. You can get a sense of scale from the figure there. And I'm ending on this piece that I made. This was the last piece I made in a riverbed in Lower Mustang, and it was just a raised path in the riverbed, which at some point will get cut through by the river, but just exists temporarily. And that's what's inspired. I'm now taking you to Fife and showing you a couple of slides of what really inspired me when I was walking with Ali in Fife. This beautiful paved section in Crail and these extraordinary harbours. I urge any of you in Britain to go and explore the coastline. And that's what's inspiring the piece I'm making in May. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Julia. That's really, really inspiring. And I think I love the way in which you take us to completely different landscapes, like all over the world. And I'm just wondering, really, that you have this intimate connection with the materiality of each place. So quite often we walk through, but maybe we don't feel it in the way that you feel it because you're sort of situated in one particular spot. And I just think that the lines you create, they create a different perspective on those places. So it'll be interesting to pick that up after we've heard from Shinlee, who is working to create trails in Taiwan. Over to you, Shinlee.
Okay, let me share my screen real quick. Okay, so I'll give a little introduction about myself first. I'm Shinlee from Taiwan, and I'm a project secretary from Thousand Mile Trails Association, or TMI Trail for short. And our organization is a nonprofit that works on trail, and the two main focus that we do is to promote national long distance trails, kind of like the national trails in UK. And another thing is eco-craft trails. So eco-craft trail is a term that we coined specifically to describe a trail building method that relies on human labor and hand power tools instead of heavy machinery. And we try to use the natural materials that are found on site as much as possible. So when we work on the trail, we have the minimum impact on the natural environment, and we can also preserve whatever the historical remain is of the area. And this next photo is a film poster from the film that we made. It's called Dancing with Rocks, and it's a really good demonstration of the eco-craft trail building method. And this project happens, it's spanned over a period of 3 years and happens on an island west of Taiwan. And in this film, it shows that every time before we decide to intervene in an area with the eco-craft trail method, we will do a very thorough survey of the area. So we will take into account of the environmental factors and the historical records of the area, and then we will decide how we're going to work on the trail. And so, for example, in this project, on this island, when we go there, we can already find that people there are already using the natural rocks, like coral rocks found on that island, and building architecture. And this is a view of the ruins on the island that already existed on the island. And when we decide how we're gonna work, how we're gonna build the trails on the island, we will recruit volunteers, and we will hold work parties or working holidays, and then we will teach the volunteers how to build the trails. So this is a photo of them working on the island. And you can see that everyone is doing things by hand. And every time the eco-craft trail work for outsider, when they go to the site, it's really invisible labor, but to the maker, it's really a labor of love. When you go there, oftentimes after the work, it's hard to tell that anything has been done to that area, because the point of eco-craft trail is for the trail to blend completely seamlessly with the environment. So for example, in this photo, instead of setting up a signpost, we use these pile of stone. We stack them as a sign to guide visitors to follow, to stay on the trail. And And so far in Taiwan, we've worked on about 177 trails using the EcoCraft trail method. And every time when we go into a new area, we will want to use the traditional trail building method that's already specific to the area. So when we do that, we need to look for experienced local craftsmen that's already there. But oftentimes, these group of people, they are under-recognized. So their knowledge and their skill tend to get lost over time. So what my organization wanted to do is that around 2018, we started an award program that we try to identify these kind of craftsmen in different cultural groups in Taiwan. And then we give them the title of the Honorary Trail Masters. And so by doing that, we hope that we can honor these craftsmen, we honor their existence, and we also leave a record of their skill and their work. And we also hope that by giving them this award, it will give their community a sense of pride and importance. And so it will make them want to preserve their traditional knowledge and keep passing it on to future generation, and hopefully keep using it more as a way to take care of their environment. And this next photo is actually when we are filming one of the honorary trail masters that we recorded. And this elder, he was 88 years old at the time when he was awarded, and he's one of the first honorary trail masters that we awarded. And the cultural group that he comes from, it's an indigenous group called Taiwan, and he lives in the southern part of Taiwan, and he's known for his stone splitting and stone laying method. And you can see that the way that he used stone, it can be used for flooring and to build walls and to build stairs. And this way of building, the stone really helps soil from water erosion. And he built all this by hand. And in this next photo is a photo still taken from a film that we make about him. You can see that the road he built, it's very sturdy, like even bikes can travel on it. And these are just more photos of him showing, demonstrating how he works. So including stone splitting and measuring before chipping away the edges, and then laying them on the ground or whatever surface that he needs. And so there are many other cultural groups in Taiwan. And this next photo, it's a photo of another crew. They're called a stoneware crew, and they live in also another island around Taiwan. And the cultural group that they come from, it's the Han Chinese Mingnan group. And this group of people, they use stone to build structures on sea. And you can see that they're working, and this is the structure that they build from above. And so on the island that I live on, they will build stone structures like this. This is a fishing trap. So you can see that the structure works with the tide. When the tide rises, the fish will float into this heart-shaped circle. And when the tide recedes, the fish will stay inside. And that's when the local people come in and collect all the fishes. And another example is this. This photo is showing a dry stacking method, and this is another honorary trail master that we awarded. And the cultural group that he comes from, it's called the Han Chinese, the Hakka group. And you can see that he uses dry stacking method to build walls, and these walls are very porous, so snakes, rodents, and insects, they can live between the stones. And so you can see that even though this is a man-made structure, it still coexists with nature, and it also creates a unique landscape to this area. And so far, as of now, we've awarded 12 different groups for the as an honorary trail master. And then we've made a video of all of them. So I've provided a link here. If anyone's interested, you can go check them out. And the 3 listed here are the ones that I talked about today. And if you're interested more with the EcoCraft Trail, you can watch Dancing with the Stone film here also. It's also part of the World Trails film selected film, like a few years ago in Greece. Yeah, and that's all for me, from me.
Wow. Thank you very much, Shinlee. That's absolutely amazing. And it kind of feels to me like your honorary trail makers are also artists. And it'd be really interesting to hear from others your response to both of these presentations and the balance between a kind of craft and a contemporary art. So perhaps you'd just like to stop sharing the screen, Shinlee, and then we can open up the conversation. Yeah, brilliant. Julie, can I ask you to create your response, share your response to Shinlee's presentation?
I think I find the skills that people have that they've used all their lives, so that they will know the materials inside out. I spoke a little bit about that relationship between our mind and body. It's one of the skills I respect most. I think of in humanity. I think when we have this very deep-seated connection with our materials, and in the case of the craftspeople that Shinlee highlighted, and there will be many women doing this as well, naturally, that didn't get highlighted. And I think it's that connection. In a way, it's that sort of skill and understanding and longevity. That's what I sort of want to, in some way, imbue when I make the work, even though I go to different places. And I find it a great privilege when I can work with people like these people that Shinlee highlighted, because their knowledge is so, and I can share that even with no shared language, you know, both in Namibia and Japan more recently. And it's a very, it's a real privilege to, you know, in a sense, work alongside people who have that very deep-seated body knowledge. And I wish I started really thinking about that when I went to Jura, the difference between experience knowledge and book knowledge. And I feel that walking does give us more of that sort of body knowledge, but you're right, we can just walk through a landscape and not notice everything. And it made me think about schools, how children they're learning so much by book and by teacher, and should have a lot more chance to go outside and learn for themselves, because I think the knowledge we learn for ourselves stays at a very, it never disappears. It you know, we imbibe it.
Thank you. Yeah, really fantastic. Shinlee, I was going to ask you then a little bit about whether you involve young people and schools in your trail building programs.
And yeah, we have worked with several groups, not me personally, but we have someone in our organization that work with schools sometimes. And we will lead them to work parties and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic the way that you're honoring the trail masters and giving them that respect, and hopefully that kind of translates down to the younger generation so that they feel that sense of connection to that experience knowledge that Julie's talking about. So yeah. Would anybody else in the room like to chip into the conversation? Andrew, would you like to give us your thoughts?
Well, I just typed something in the chat, actually. I'm not sure whether I put it very well, but what I was trying to say was that, picking up on what Julie was saying, was that walking gives everyone a chance to embody the landscape and experience it. The problem we have at the moment is that the vast majority of people actually spend most of their day either looking through a windscreen, driving a car, or looking at a laptop or looking at a Zoom call like we are now. And I find it quite extraordinary because I do quite a lot of work where I work with people who are very anxious and they have kind of mental health problems, and anxiety is one of the big things at the moment. And it's pretty extraordinary when you get them outside. They seem to calm down dramatically. You know, it's sort of when we're sort of grouped together inside a room, they're everyone's anxious. You know, anticipation of something, but they don't know what, and they're quite anxious. You get them outside, and then take them on a walk, and they suddenly, you know, I mean, I wouldn't say it all goes away, but a lot of it goes away. A lot of that anxiety goes away, and I really recognize what Julie's saying about the privilege of working with people who are skilled craftsmen. And Shinlee, I've worked as a volunteer, you know, on trail making. I have to say it's been nothing quite as exotic as Taiwan. It's you know, been in the sort of grubby peri-urban areas of British towns and cities. But yeah, I mean, it's great when you work with someone who's sort of like a joiner or a carpenter. I don't tend to work with Julie with stone. You know, it's much more. I've been more involved in building styles or you know, in banking things with wood, like railway sleepers or occasionally guardrails from the motorway we've nicked. But otherwise, yeah, I can really empathize with what you're saying. It's a real privilege to work with people who really know how to make something out of what appears to be nothing, really.
Mm.
Well, except that, you know, when you go into the landscape, what I really like the way Shinlee's groups really listen to the landscape first to discover how to make the trail. And the huge difference between Shinlee's work and my work is that they're trying to create an invisibility, and I want to create a balance. So it's a different intention, but the invisibility is a beautiful thing. And there isn't nothing there. It's the earth there, that's the stone there. It's you're discovering what the natural materials are. And as soon as you engage with them, rather than just walking through the landscape, you discover so much about them. And I think crucially also, these groups form new communities that people are very isolated from. And there's nothing more connecting than a day's hard work together, which happened by rote everywhere when we were having to make our food, you know, a few hundred years ago. And we've lost so much of because of the industrial scale in which everything's made. And I think that sense of satisfaction and community that groups in Taiwan must get, or any path makers must get, is incredibly rewarding. It's why people will volunteer to do it, because I think they'll get a sense of huge achievement and learning and excitement, but also coming together as a group, which is what Ali's work so strongly about.
Yeah, I think Julie is absolutely right about the bonding part. And I have to clarify, these are not my work. I'm also just a very new participant and learning about all this. And so I've participated in just like very few work party ever since I started this job. And you will always hear stories about people who, you know, they have joined several work parties before, and they will say things like, oh yeah, last time I go back to where we work and just to show my friends that one step that I make with, you know, with my group. Yeah, it's really fun.
Oh,
Yeah, and you always learn a lot from older volunteers or you know, more experienced people. And I think it's just very it makes you bond with the environment and with the people you work with very strongly. Mhm.
Mm. Fantastic. Does anybody else want to chip into this conversation? Anne-Marie, are you smiling away there? Is there anything you'd like to say?
Hi there. Yes, no, I'm just very much enjoying it. Julie's just sort of answered the question because I was going to talk about. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes. Yeah.
Holding me. But just the difference between the craft and the art, is there any difference? In many ways there aren't, but just the idea of drawing attention to something I thought was very interesting. So that, Julie, what you do is you want to, in a way, you want a balance. You don't want something sticking out in a kind of incongruous way, but at the same time, you want to draw, like I looked at the riverbed work that you did, and it's sort of just drawing attention to the curve of the river. I suppose, I'm sure there are other intentions there as well, but it just makes you think about the way water flows, although you're using stone in a sense to replicate that. Whereas the craftspeople, and someone's made a comment here about the dry stone walling, which in Ireland, and I've seen it in bits of Somerset as well, that technique, and as it is in Taiwan as well, it's about creating something that's almost seamless, so you can walk past. I mean, I walked past dry stone walls. I have friends who live in Somerset, and I walked past them numerous times until someone started telling me about the technique. I never really thought about it. So there's quite a selfless thing about the craftspeople, that they just toil away making this work. No one really notices it, except if it falls apart, I suppose, or if it's not there anymore. So I just thought that was an interesting comparison. Also, Julie, I was thinking about you last night because someone gave me a book by Paula Hawkins called The Blue Hour, which is about an artist working on an island called Eris Island in Scotland, and how she relates to the environment, and being buffeted by the winds and freezing, and other people coming to the island and falling off the cliffs. But she keeps, and I was saying, yeah, just that sense of, we think of the nice aspects of, oh yes, it's nice getting out of the office and working in the landscape, but there's real physical challenges for both the craftspeople and the artists. You worked in Libya. I imagine it was incredibly hot there. There's other places where it's freezing cold, or the rain is beating down on you, and it's interesting to me to see how that comes out in the work that's created as well. The hostile elements of the environment as well.
That's very expressive in the Falstaff work, because the wind is such an important part of the visual. It's made visual through the roughness of the sea and the way the fire works. So I suspect our climate is rather different from yours in Taiwan, Shinlee, and also in Australia. So it can be very, very harsh in Scotland, and at times almost too extreme, but then it sort of suddenly will deliver a whole nother aspect to its weather, because it changes. So it's very volatile, our weather, which makes it very interesting. But you're right, wind, that was the single thing that sort of really, really at times exhausted me in Jura, was wrestling with the wind. And then when I got a very modest windmill generated to create a bit of light in the evenings, because I spent a whole year in the Arch, and I was worried about ruining my eyes with lack of light. And it was a fantastic transformation when the wind was being translated into something I could actually use, rather than being just knocked over by it. But you're right. I think weather plays another invisible part, because it's very hard to convey heat through my films, for instance. But I think it's all of that, the temperature, the weather, that's all informing how you work and how you connect with the work, in a really interesting way, actually. And I haven't been asked about that so specifically, so it'd be good to think more about that.
Thank you.
Fantastic. I just wondered if anybody else, Tamsin, it's lovely to see you writing away. I just wondered if you'd like to chip in at all, especially as you're in Scotland. I imagine you're in Scotland.
Yes, I'm in Scotland, in the wind and the rain and the cold, and the waves being buffeted around. I don't know if I do have anything. I'm just really, really inspired by the work. It's wonderful to see the work of both women, and I suppose, like you were saying, Julie, the only way to to get a real life experience of the film is to empathize, to imagine that you're there, and anybody that's been lucky enough to come out of the sea in the winter and have a fire on the beach, can really appreciate that. And I love your point about the wind being transformed into light that you can use, and that transforming your relationship with it, and Shinlee's stories about the master and the mistress craftsmen are making me think about my own area and the industries that used to be in Granton, and how artists are making much more ink from pigment now, much more making paper, making meshes, all of which used to be made in the large industries in our area, and how those can be transformed into artworks to help us both understand our heritage and create something new in an area which is a bit like a wasteland a lot of the time. So yeah, just thank you, really. Thanks.
Great, really lovely to see you, Tamsin. So I think this might be a good moment to talk about what Julie is going to be doing in Fife in Scotland, because when I first experienced Julie's work through the film and at her exhibition, which was in Kendal in 2023, so and I remember sitting in the room watching the fire start, thinking it how feeling, almost trying to feel that heat. But when I had the privilege to meet Julie in person, particularly when we were walking the Fife Coast Path, I was sort of almost saying, well, Julie, now we're going to do this in public. So I think the work that Julie's going to make in Fife is, it's going to be on a public footpath, and she's going to be involving volunteers. So, for me, that is a bit of a step change. And so, Julie, perhaps you'd like to talk a little bit more about the tide line and the process, and also the fact that we're going to involve many schools up and down the Fife Coast Path to engage with Julie in the landscape.
Yes, well, on a very practical level, it's the same as when I'm working in a community in a more remote place. First of all, permissions need to be granted. So I recently met the young farmer whose land runs down to that coastline, to explain really carefully how I'm proposing to do the work, and so that he can enjoy that sort of journey and process of the work evolving. My intention is to do sort of very similar to what Shinlee's teams do. I'm just taking the stone from the seabed. I'm planning to make that path in the sort of mid-tide line, so it will be a tidal work. And really, it's enabling to create a sort of raised line in the spirit of what I did in Namibia and in Nepal. So that people can walk in a section of the seabed they wouldn't normally. It's quite slippery and uneven and has rock pools and so on. And I love the idea of bringing people into that liminal space of when the tide is coming over it and then receding again. So there's a sort of more physical engagement with the tide that people, particularly locals, will be very familiar with, but may not have particularly thought to engage with it in a slightly more physical and bodily way. I will have a small team working with me, core team, who will, and then when volunteers do come up, it means then it's not just me showing people how to do it. They will be learning on the job. So the other thing is, my work often involves people who are not experienced in making, and them learning as we go along, which I think is in a way, a very wonderful form of teaching, because I'm in a way finding out how to do each work as I go along. But if I draw on people who have natural physical, practical skills, excuse me, they often bring a huge amount to that process, and equally enabling volunteers, because a great deal of realizing good work is enthusiasm and a very positive attitude. And equally with the children, I don't know how much, I suspect I'll be doing more drawing workshops with the children, but the idea is to get them outside and looking at their own environment next to their school, and something that they're familiar with every day, walking to school or being dropped off, and saying, look where we live. So there is that, how the work ties in with Ali's walking artistry and the educational project. It's all about sort of celebrating their own environment through this work. And with the tide line, I think for the duration that it's there, it gives people a chance to, you know, of all ages, all abilities, to walk in this part of the seabed that they wouldn't normally see, allows them to look back at the landscape in a different way. And then we would like to culminate that with commissioning a new musical work by a young composer and a poet, and it be performed by a children's choir from hopefully from St Andrews. And so there is a sort of celebratory element as well that ties in with what Ali's doing overall in the Beach of Dreams.
Yeah, we're really excited about this and this development, I guess, of Julie's work coming to Fife. And so I suppose bringing that back to Beach of Dreams. So the Beach of Dreams will happen from the whole of May in different parts of the UK. And there's an invitation for people to organise their own pop-up beach events anywhere in the world on any coast during that month. So if you're interested, that's great. But I'd sort of like to really bring it back to kind of the power of the walking arts, really, because what we've seen in Fife is that we've seen organisations up and down the Fife coastline sort of step forward and want to get involved, and we're working in partnership with the Fife Coast and Countryside Trust, who have been amazing, and so they'll be organising this continuous walk from the 14th to the 25th of May, and where there'll be many different kind of organisations and local artists getting involved in different kinds of activity every single day. And what we are seeing, myself and Julie, is like the whole of that coastline becoming really connected through the Beach of Dreams. And, you know, I think the thing that we're beginning to think about is what legacy that will leave in terms of a connected community, really committed to looking after that coastline in all sorts of different ways. So for me, it's just really proving concept of the model, really, and I think in Fife it's showing up in a really connected way. And I suppose it's for the partnership which this conversation has been about. Really, it's about the trail itself and maintaining the trail, and with looking at that with Shinlee's work, you know, maintaining the traditions and keeping those trails open and walked and connected with their community. And the Fife Coast Coast and Countryside Trust, that's their kind of job, really. I suppose they're the guardian of this trail, but it's about engaging the communities in that, and that's why they wanted to be part of Beach of Dreams, because they wanted to make this connection between all the Fife Coast communities. And the role of the artists, in terms of Julie, in terms of Beach of Dreams, local artists, Art Moves Fife, a very active collective of artists looking at the landscape. So it's really fantastic, and this kind of has brought all of that together in this conversation. So
I think what I'm noticing as well, from a slightly more standing back, because Ali's so involved with all these different communities, is that she's connecting them all as well, because some of them don't know each other. And I'm sure Shinlee's work does this, where there are these, like, you know, some of your traditions you were showing us, Shinlee. You know, the beauty of someone like what you do and what Ali does is you are introducing like the Lower Largo people to the Anstruther people to the, and that's having a huge effect. You know, Ali's sort of acting like a binding thread to say, oh, do you know this group, that they're doing something that's echoes what you're doing. And I think that's been a very exciting part of witnessing that.
yeah, It's like the thread, isn't it? And it's fantastic to see Tamsin here because Beach of Dreams happened in the east coast of the UK in 2021, where we walked 500 miles and invited people to adopt a mile of the coastline each by making a silk pennant. So my material is the silk, which is hand woven from India. So there's a connection there. And I suppose I now have a kind of intimate knowledge of that silk in the way that Julie works with the stone, I guess. But we walked there was a walk from Dunbar to Glasgow to walk into COP in November 2021, when I walked and met with Tamsin and many Scottish artists and activists and other pilgrims that have come all the way from Europe. So, it was in that walk where we were walking into COP that the kind of idea of scaling Beach of Dreams up nationally was born. So it's fantastic that is now, it's actually coming into being. So yeah, I think this might be the closing point of our cafe.
Yeah.
Shall I jump in? I've got a quick question actually, which I wrote in the chat. Is Julie, with the with the tide line, how long do you imagine it'll endure? Will it be possible for the children who are involved in it become adults and bring children of their own to see remnants of it, or will it be gone in a couple of years? What do you imagine?
Well, I think judging by how fierce the sea can get in Fife, I imagine it being a fairly transient piece. But who knows? You have to ask the sea that, because it might be that because it's so low to the ground, it might be a little bit sturdier than I think. But at the same time, I've had pretty sturdy pieces that are there one day and then gone the next. I made a huge circular wall in North Uist that was really heavy, it was using all the surrounding stone, but it was right next to the sea, and it was there for about 2 years, and then one day the whole lot vanished. So
there's the wall down. Sorry.
No, you go, Louisa.
No, very briefly. I was just going to say, I'm sure there's the wall down the coast where they've built the new swimming pool, the new outdoor swimming pool. So you can walk right in the sea, as it were, across the top of that wall. And I'm sure it's not a beautiful dry stone wall. It's very solid. But the seawater rushes into it where people swim and back out again.
I love those. Yeah, that's at Celadite. Yeah, Ali and I observed a few of those Tamsin on our way up, and I think they're wonderful. And we saw people swimming in them, using them as well. And it's very magical. And there's so much traditional building along that coastline. I just showed you a couple of images, but over and over we were spellbound by the harbours. And I also love the piece that Shinlee, the fish trap, Shinlee showed us when people are, because I know what it's like to build in the sea, Shinlee, and it's hard. And to build such a big structure in the sea is really, really demanding. And also there's an inherent beauty in those things that, they're functional, that sea trap, but it has a beauty. I'm quite sure that Robert Smithson drew his inspiration from these traditional forms of building in the sea when he made his spiral jetty.
Yeah. I think the divide between craft and art, it's sometimes not from the maker, but from the perceiver. And and I want to respond to a message Mary wrote, but I think she left a chat. So she said the dry stacking method is very prevalent in Ireland also. And one of my colleagues, Jackie, I think Ali, you've met him. He's also involved in a new World Trail Network task team, and it's called like Design or something. And they're trying to collect more examples, not just from Taiwan, but all over the world, traditional trail building method all over the world. So if anyone has information on this, maybe a short video or something, you are welcome to share with me. So I will put my email in the chat, and if anyone has anything there, you're welcome to just send it directly to us.
I just did want to mention to the Australians in the room that the next World Trail Network conference is in Australia, and we've already started having conversations with Amy and Molly about doing some kind of Beach of Dreams-esque walk in Perth in October 26th. So watch this space. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, wonderful. Very good. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, yeah, thanks to everyone. I just put in that link to our next event, which is Tim Parks in the Salon. But a really big special thanks to Shinlee and Julie Brook. Really, really fabulous what work you're doing yourself or encouraging others to do. And Ali, thanks for bringing them together.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks, Ali, for
so much.
inviting us.